So the point of this, in as much as it needs to be a point, is that obviously with 100 years, keep getting asked to do stuff, and as the BD college, and I thought it'd be good to interview a few grey-haired people like yourself who have interesting perspectives, not necessarily the mainstream one. And okay, so as I when I got in touch with you, I was mentioning something at the end of the podcast you did with Alan Balaye about how the agriculture course and the medical course can inform each other to mutual benefit. And you said that Pfeiffer had, decided he had to sort of ground this impulse, and he went for the safe route just to make sure it didn't scare the horses, but that you were quite keen that the esoteric side of biodynamics now, could be out and proud. And that resonated with me a lot. So I guess that boils down to maybe we can look back at the last 100 years and think, how are we doing biodynamics now that we're 100 years old?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good image. And I think we'll find that the second generation, the Kirks and the Koenigs and those folks, they more or less carried on with Pfeiffer to try and get that scientific credibility, through the 80s and so on. And that's good. Yes, and I think it is time that we bring back the sort of energetic aspects of biodynamics into consciousness and usefulness, really. And the medical lectures are the rod in the ground that we can work with and around, to get a clear picture of that. And of course, it really comes down to this image of 4 bodies in 3 physical systems. It's the easiest way to sort of talk about that approach, really.
Given that you've been saying that for a long time and people still aren't getting it, would you give a brief introduction to the 4 bodies, the 3 systems?
Yeah. Now, it's really quite clearly stated in the 1924 medical lectures called Pastoral Medicine. And there he's talking to priests and doctors. And right basically in the first lecture, he sort of gives this diagram of these 4 sheaths that we have. And of course, these relate back to the 4 astronomical spheres. So, when we look into our environment, we've got the Earth, but then we see that out of the Earth and the life of the Earth, we have the atmosphere of the Earth that supports our life processes. And then we have the solar system as an energetic sphere. And then, of course, that solar system exists within a galaxy of stars. And so essentially what we get is this picture of as above, so below, and that those star activities incarnate into us as what Rudolf Steiner calls the spirit, and that the planetary activities of the solar system are the astral body. And just as a sort of an image, what we have in the creation of the solar system is, of course, a star in the middle, and it's doing all of its action and pumping out all this dross, and the planets are coming around and picking all that dross up. So we've got a nuclear reactor with all of these compost heaps running around it. And so the planets are this accumulation of the activity of the star, of the spirit. And so this is what the astral body is. It's all the T-shirts you've got from all of the experiences you've had through all of your incarnations. And so, this is the image of this astral body. It's really a planetary body. And then, of course, we come to the atmosphere where these life processes support our life processes. And we call that the etheric. And then, of course, the Earth is the basis of our physical bodies. And so, one of the important things in looking at this is that this is all real. We're not sort of asking anybody to believe anything or some fantasy. It's actually these energetic activities that exist in our environment and that we are a product of. And so the words might seem a little strange, but really all we're talking about is star forces, planetary forces, atmospheric forces, and earth forces. And so, Rudolf Steiner is saying these are the four activities that manifest us. And according to how those bodies work and interact with each other, then we get all these physical expressions. And so the game that he puts forward for us is that if we can align these activities, these bodies, back into their natural form, then we're going to have health. And, through the agriculture course, we get various images of this. And the best one really is that idea where he's talking about the nematodes in the 6th lecture. And it's just one sort of little paragraph, but he makes this comment, now we're going to walk on very thin ice, and goes on to talk about the nematodes and how we have this astral or planetary force working too strongly down into the soil, and that's the energetic activity that's allowing the nematode to be there, and that if we take that out of there, if we change that balance, then the nematode has to go away. And so the question is, how do we do that?
Can I put a question in before that?
Yep.
But to park it, we're going to get on to how do you do that. Why do you think why did you think Steiner said that was treading on thin ice?
Well, he was talking about peppering, of course, at the time, and he throws this little paragraph in, and then he goes back to talking about peppering again. And of course, that story about the nematode is not peppering. Peppering is working on the fertility stream of the animal, not changing the environment of the animal. And one of the things with peppering, of course, is that you'll get rid of that bird, and then will come another. You get rid of the sparrow and you'll get a finch, and you get rid of the finch and you get a waxeye. And there's this energetic hole here, and if you don't close that hole up, then you'll just get another insect. And so this was a pretty far out idea at the time, and so I think he was putting it forward as a suggestion. He hadn't proved it, let's say. Whereas they'd made 500 and they'd put it on plants and they knew what it did to some degree. Whereas I think this was a bit of a waving a flag saying, well, here's a potential, here's an opportunity. Let's consider that, So that's why I think he said that, as a insertion into that conversation.
So to pick up, thank you for going down that byway with me. To pick up, you're saying the nematodes are a manifestation of those four energetic bodies, not in the harmony we would wish, but we can do something about it.
Yeah. Well, this becomes, for me, what the biodynamic preparations are. There's a couple are indicated in the agriculture course as to their energetic activity. And then, of course, Leafgood clarifies another couple. And then when we put them into order, we can actually see all of the energetic activities of the various preparations. Yeah. And of course, we've got two ways of removing the astral out of the earth, let's call it the above ground astral, that because there's going to be some level of astrality in the earth, and we know that there's lots of beneficial nematodes, not just the nasty nematodes, and so we can actually harmonize and pull out the astral with things like yarrow and stinging nettle, but we can also stimulate the etheric activity and push the astral out with things like 500 and the chamomile preparation. And so we have these tools available to us to work with these energetic activities. And of course, we can then extend that. I've extended that into chemistry and identified how the chemical elements affect those four bodies' interactions as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
if Steiner was 100 years ahead, it feels like your chemical work is another few centuries ahead.
well,
Is
yeah, I
that
get it.
yeah,
I accept that,
yeah.
and it's quite interesting. We've just done a little video on when I look at my process of getting to chemistry. It is based on Goethean observation, so it really is just about looking at what's in front of us and asking questions. And as it turns out, there's sort of 8 basic questions to get from what's in front of us to my chemistry. And they're incredibly simple questions, so simple that I think people don't believe how simple it is.
Are you happy to give us these simple questions?
Well, it's a bit hard to run through it without pictures and a sort of a presentation, but that video should be available in the near future.
Okay.
And make it available to people. At this stage, it's probably just enough to give that suggestion that really it's actually very simple steps of observation and question that gives this very powerful tool for working with these chemical elements. And I think that's the sort of shocking thing, is that you do a couple of simple things and all of a sudden you've got this incredibly powerful piece of information. And anyway, that's the chemistry. And so I get it that it's a bit in the future. I can't do anything about that. I've just been prepared to run down the hole because I saw it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's amazing that you do that. I'm just trying to think, so with the Biodynamic Agriculture College, we're taking people from a cold start. They're reasonably well educated, young, idealistic Westerners usually. So we've all been taught that there's the only reality is matter, essentially, and astrologers and biodynamic people all, don't sit next to them on the bus. You might catch something. So, but then the slightly more troublesome thing for me is that so many people who are into biodynamics don't even take the first steps. So to sell them the energetic bodies is already, it seems, for me it works, for you it obviously works, but how to open that door to people and actually encourage them through is the step for now for me. And I wondered if you found a good way of doing that.
Well, that story I just told about the basis of the bodies, as above, so below, keeping it real, like it is Star Force, and I sort of, what is not real about what I've just said? The galaxy, the solar system, the atmosphere of the Earth. What's debatable about that as energetic activities? And so that's the first thing, is to keep them real, and then, okay, how do we experience those bodies is the real thing. And I've got to say that the best experience I've had of those bodies is when I've actually taken the biodynamic preparations.
Tell us about
it. So, of course, with the biodynamic preparations, we can make them into homeopathic remedies. And so, if anybody's afraid of the biology, we make the tinctures of those preparations in 30% alcohol. So it's killing all of the bugs. So it's actually a sterile mixture. And then, of course, we potentize these things up in 10% alcohol. So there's no bugs. It's not going to poison you. And so, as I've just sort of stated, we have these sort of images of the preparations where the oak bark helps the etheric activity sort of combine with the physical. The chamomile, strengthens the etheric. The yarrow opens up this etheric activity to this astrality. I find the stinging nettle preparation calms down the astrality, and the dandelion preparation helps to integrate the spirit with the astrality and push that towards the earth. And the valerian strengthens the spirit activity. And so in that process, we have the ability to move all these bodies around. And if we take those preparations, we experience the movement of the bodies. And so, we can say things like other experiences, like, of course, when we sleep, you have tiredness and then you go to sleep and you wake up and you're revived. Well, what's happened there? And we can say that we lie down in the bed and we breathe very strongly and rhythmically, so we're reoxygenating our body, and in that reoxygenation we feel revitalized, and then over a period of time we get tired again. So this is our etheric body moving around. But if we can take some, let's call it chamomile preparation, even chamomile tea, it's sort of, where are we sitting now? We drink the chamomile tea, 10, 15 minutes later, how are we feeling? Are we feeling sort of lighter and more awake? Or, so we can identify these bodies. So we can take things like silica and phosphorus, magnesium phosphate or potassium phosphate, and experience this clarity in our thinking. We're sort of muddled, and the classic is what's called brain fog, let's call it. A student who's been studying and all of a sudden they're running around and doing everything but studying. And so you take some potassium phosphate or silica, and all of a sudden you're sort of clear and you're on the job again and you're getting things done. Well, this is the incarnation of the spirit. And so it's really about looking at these energies in ourselves and making them, what would you call it, real, making them real experiences. And once they're real experiences, then where's the argument here? So that's been the most powerful way that I've been able to identify these bodies. And then, of course, plant trials. We can, use the biodynamic preparations to influence plant growth and observe the plant form changes that occur when you just spray 500 and chamomile on a cabbage, for example. What happens? Or you get those out of planet preparations, silica, dandelion, valerian, and spray them onto a plant, and what happens? And in a sense, this is that kale picture that I did back in the 90s, where you can have these 3 plants all sitting there and you can see one go this way and one go that way, and what is that? So I think it's those sorts of things that can actually show people these activities, in a real form.
Yeah, well, it's always powerful seeing those kale photos.
Yeah,
and I think one of the to blow your trumpet for you, I think one of the things that you do very well as an educator is you have these drawings, these schema, these things where the little bits are always in context. You're also working out the whole all the time, so a bit doesn't sort of drift off and just become some kind of interesting fact out of context. But as I've said to you, the creation of those drawings in front of people really opens them up. I think seeing the finished thing, somehow I don't think
too much at one time.
Yeah, well, I mean, it will speak volumes to you, but it'll be just confusion to them.
Yeah, that's right. And what could I say other than it would be nice to have had the opportunity to educate people over the years, which I've never had. It's I've never run a 1-year course or anything like that. At the best I might have had a weekend here or there. So yeah, people have missed an awful lot of in-between stuff, really. But, you know, as I say, if I did have some sort of a course, then I would have people taking those remedies for, you know, a 2-month or 3-month period, you know, and make these things real. And we'd be running plant trials, and, you know, you've got to sort of get it into your body somehow, you know, into your experience. And because it's, dare I say it, it's a very, very simple game. There's only 4 bodies, you know, and it's not hard. Like the spirit, like if we look at a building site, you know, the spirit is the architect. The astral body, which is the planets which move around the place, that's your master builder. And then, of course, the etheric is the workers, and the physical is the wood and nails and things like that. So it's, you know, take the architect out of the game, and all of a sudden the master builders sort of got all these different ideas and plans, and take the master builder out of the game, and the workers are going to sit down and do nothing. You know, it's really that simple. As a sort of an understanding, and then as a technology, you know, the etheric will blow things up, but if it doesn't have a container, it'll just run in all sorts of directions, you know. And this is cancer, of course, that the spirit is not controlling the etheric body, so that just blub, 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 you know. So and you know, there's this whole story about equisitum, you know, where we've got this silica light process working down into the metabolism around regarding to the kidneys and so on. But the problem of these small kidneys that the equisitum solves is that it's the astrality coming in to get the etheric body active again, because it becomes sluggish. And so, you know, these are pretty simple images, and it's really just about, okay, there's all these manifestations that happen out of all these, but it's not that difficult. Mm. Dare I say it after 50 years.
You can say it. One or two of us will believe you. And blowing your trumpet again, I thought your paper on the sort of equisitum thing was brilliant in that way, and interesting that you've also come to the sporangia phase of the equisitum and differentiated what it'll do from the other the secondary manifestation of equisitum. So yeah, hats off to you again.
Well, that's what's in the literature. You know, I've had more time, I guess, in the last sort of 10 years or so, where I've been able to actually go into the literature and actually accumulate it all. And you know, and I've had this process where I just put it all into a Word document, everything I can find, and then just sit down and read it, you know, and pull it together. And well, this is what comes out, you know, this is the information. So this is what the story is, really.
Yeah.
And you know, I've done that with the energetic plant growth story, and I've done it with the physical formative forces story. And, you know, so I've got a 70-page sort of document that I can then work with down into the basic stories. But it's all there, you know, it's just information that's sort of lying around in bits, you know. After 100 years, there's a whole lot of really good information lying around. But, you know, there's this whole thing about farmers, you know, there's not a lot of energy left over at the end of the day for a farmer. And you know, in the fundamentals of therapy, I think with Rudolf Steiner and Weigmann, I think it's the 5th chapter or something, they talk about these etheric forces that are not used up, and how they can be free then to be used in imaginative thinking. And of course, farmers don't have any free etheric forces left over at the end of the day. But it's people like you and me who aren't farming every day that we have those forces left over, so that we can actually start sort of looking at these big pictures and sort of struggling with all those different sort of bits and making them some sort of cohesive whole. So, you know, while people might complain I'm not a farmer, the gift of that is, you know, the ability to pull together all these ideas that need to be brought together. Because, you know, as we know, Rudolf Steiner was a very imaginative fellow, you know, and he was throwing out all of these jewels, and he, you know, I was reading something the other day where he said, you know, we're going to need these very intellectual people who can come and get these stories and make them real and practical, you know, because, you know, he kept leaving gaps in things and using different languages for the same story. And so it's, you know, it has, you know, you've got to accumulate his basic story, and then you've got to organize it and sort of, and then you've got to fill in the gaps, you know. And so it's like 100 years later, we're just getting his story straight, you know, and yeah.
I mean, okay, so it's both incredibly labyrinthine and simple, or what do they call it? The elusive obvious, you know. Once you've done all that work, you can get down to something that you go, oh, God, why didn't you say that? But there's a few.
Go
on.
Well, that's the 1924 pastoral medicine, really. You know, he's had this whole career, and right at the end, he's telling this incredibly simple story, you know, and he says in those lectures, he says, well, back in 1911, when I was doing theosophy and so on, I had to tell the theosophical story, which was all very complex, you know, but in fact, this is it. This is the story that I would have liked to have told back then, but because of the context of the time, I had to tell this other complex story, you know. So, and you can see this in his, you know, after 1920, his whole lectures become much more practically focused. You know, he does the education, the medicine, the agriculture, and as you go into those 20s, they become clearer and clearer. And in a sense, right at the end of his life, he's, you know, if you look at his astrology, that was one of his best times, right towards the end of his life. And you can see that it just gets clearer, you know, and simpler. But, you know, as I say, 100 years later, and after my 50 years, it's 4 bodies in 3 physical systems. You know, that's the task for us. And he said to the young doctors at one point, he said, I want you to walk around with a notebook in your pocket, and everything that you come across, every ailment you come across, I want you to sit down and write, what is the energetic body activity of this? And the young doctors said, oh, that's too difficult. And I was so surprised he sort of let them get away with it, you know, and said, oh, okay, right, we'll do something else.
Yeah.
You know, but that's the practice, you know, that's all we have to do is ask that question. You know, when I have an insect on my broccoli, what is it? What's the body's interaction?
Okay.
And just as a little image of that, the other day we were looking at curly leaf in peaches, and and if we look at that, we've got the flowering of the peach tree taking place at the same time that these leaves are coming out. And that the leaves, if you look at those with curly leaf, they're getting all twisted and bent, and they're getting all these different colors into them. And I just had this sort of vision of the flowering slipping into the leaf.
Yeah, perfect. Yes.
And that it's this process that's out of place.
Yeah.
And the solution that comes out of agrohomeopathy is sodium sulfate. And personally, I see sodium, you know, when we're looking at these 4 elements, cations, you know, sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, I see the magnesium as getting the etheric and dragging it into the soil, into the earth. I see the calcium as stimulating the etheric activity, because as we know, every bit of calcium, mineral calcium that's on the earth has gone through a life process. It's come through some body of some organism. And then the potassium I see as the light carrier, the astral influencing the water, the etheric, and the sodium is the spirit, the director. And it's very interesting in a soil test that we only need 1 part per million sodium, 1%. We need 1% sodium in the soil as opposed to 70% calcium and so on. So it's this tiny little bit that has quite a large influence on things. And so I'm seeing the sodium as a director, as the architect saying, this is where you need to be. And when we look at the anions, we've got chlorine, sulfur and phosphorus sitting in the periodic table. And the chlorine, Steiner says, kills things, brings things to an end. The phosphorus is talked about as a usher in the movie. It picks up the calcium and moves it into the bone. It moves things around. And the sulfur is the oil in the protein. It's what lets things move. And so when we're looking at sodium sulfate, it's actually getting that astrality that's out of place and just sort of pushing it back into its place.
The architect getting the master builder good, clear instructions.
Yeah, that's right. Get back into the flowering, man. Leave those bloody workers alone. And we had a fantastic success with that this spring. So anyway, that's the sort of functional picture of these things.
Well, okay. So while it's very exciting, I want to drag you back from 200 years in the future to...
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Sorry to be boring. I have to do the same for others. No. But so my practical head is thinking, okay, 2024, here we are. We've had 100 years. We've got a difficult story that we've, through yourself and a few others, have now managed to make into quite a simple series of headlines. We could go back and look how Ernst Marty and Vaxmuth argued, and there was, blockages along the way, and maybe for another day. But here we are. We finally got this clear image. We want to communicate it well to those who will listen to us, demonstrate it well with the trials. But I love the thing that you were talking about, Steiner and the young doctors and their little notepads. And for me, the diagnosis of leaf peach curl there or the nematodes feels like the next step. So we got the anthroposophical language now, we need the diagnosis, and then we can, as we become good at that, then we become good healers of planet. Good savers of life forms. The science of organics comes to life at last. So I'll blow my trumpet on the Consider Forum. I've just started all this stuff, borrowing very heavily from yourself. Thank you, kind sir, to get this going. But it feels like those who are thinking along this way, if we can share our understanding, you got a lovely picture of the leafy things getting infected by the flowery things to the detriment. But the kind of issues that came up, if anyone is watching this, on the 6th of February, earlier this month, we went to Dornach. We met up in Dornach, and all the wine buffs came in, and their big issue is mildews. And you're very good at extracting the powdery from the downy and the other kind of mildews, and really thinking through what is the energetic story in each case, and therefore what might we use as our first shots to help these guys who are trying to avoid copper and sulfur sprays all over the place. But that seems to me to drag biodynamics towards something where any farmer will say, whoopee, I want some of this, is to get the clarity on that diagnosis and meet them where they are. They're not coming to us and saying, oh, I want the perfection of sulfur as manifested in some kind of potassium bearing plant. You know, they say I got
Yeah.
blood mildew, dude. What are you going to do? Sorry. There we go.
Well, this is the, results is what speaks, uh, that's really the point, and as I say, that story about the curly leaf, it's in the resolving of that curly leaf that people sort of go, okay, there's something here, and it's in that finding of solutions. And that's what, in a sense, needs to be marketed rather than the story.
Yep.
I've tried telling people the story, and all I get back is it's so complex.
Yep.
But
yeah, an anti-intellectualism kind of out now. Just put a log on a fire.
So, but in my business practice, we don't really tell them what's going on or any of the story. We just sell a product that does a job. Yeah. And as long as it does a job and it's effective, and it's affordable, then people will buy it. So, 90% of our clientele are chemical farmers. And I don't even know who my clientele are, because I sell it to a distributor who then sells it to a contractor who then sells it to his client, so it's just these people that use it because it works. And I think one of the things that we should do in biodynamics is get all of our best solutions and make one little product range, which when we think about it would probably only be half a dozen products. Because Steiner makes this comment, I think, in the 6th lecture that, because a plant doesn't have an astral body, it doesn't get sick in the normal way of humans. And therefore, the remedies that we come up with can be very general and broad, and that they will affect a whole range of problems and a whole range of plants. Yeah. Now, in agrohomeopathy, we're still looking at these individual activities. We've got this bug, so we're going to get this predator and we're going to put it on there and we'll get rid of that bug. But if you get some 500 and some chamomile and spray it onto some plants, you'll see that you get rid of a whole lot of bugs. All your slugs, all of your grubs, probably a whole lot of beetles, all go with this one remedy. And it's the same, with the fungal. We can identify, we've got the fungus coming out of the earth, like told in the 6th lecture, but then, it's a medical lecture or one of these other stories. He starts talking about the role of cinnabar in the control of rusts and these warmth-related fungi, which is powdery mildew. And so we've basically got 2 types of fungus. And okay, so if we can work out the best remedy for the rotting funguses, which in my understanding, following the agriculture course, was equisetum, oak bark, and I say clay. You've got to push that cosmic silica process up to, so that mixture will get rid of most funguses you'll find, rotting fungus. So we don't get any brown rot. The tomatoes don't rot. There's very little rot. And then, of course, you've got to look at this other process, which he mentioned is cinnabar, which is mercury sulfate. Now, when I did that, I found it sort of, because it's a metal, it starts knocking out other elements. And the boron and the zinc and other little elements seem to be not working very well. And so I've made up this more complex mix to try and balance out that sort of excesses of mercury. And we seem to have a very good control of powdery mildew. So, put those things together and we've got a fungal product that seems to cover most bases, really. Okay. And so, as I say, if we could, all around the world, everybody put their best remedy on the table, and of course, one of the things with homeopathy is it's quite easily stolen, and because everything's just being repeated, and so homeopaths are a pretty paranoid bunch, and they don't really want to talk to each other very much. And if we just flip that whole paradigm around and say, well, let's just get the best of everybody, put them on the table, and then everybody just market those, because any value in a business is in its marketing. It's not so much in the product, it's in the marketing of that product. And the world's a big place, so there's plenty of room for everybody to get out there. And you know, and did I say there's only going to be half a dozen products? We're going to have one or two pest controls, you know, one fungicide, maybe two if you break them up. Then you're going to have plant control. You want to stimulate the light process a wee bit. You might want to stimulate the rooting process. And in the modern world, you're wanting to stimulate the fruiting process. You know, so that's pretty much covered the whole game. And we've got 6 products. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if, as I say, that would be the best way forward that I see, because it's all based on results. If we can just sort of get rid of powdery mildew out of the grape industry, therefore get rid of the sulfur and the copper and all this, then that would be mind-blowing, world-breaking, you know, and people would do it.
Have you had much success? Do you know? I mean, you say you've got these, you're at doubles arm's length with your business model, but do you not get people coming back up to you from the wine industry saying, yeah, you nailed it, thank you?
Well, I don't work with the wine industry. I work with the kiwi fruit and avocados. And so, yeah, we're getting feedback that we're helping. We have it's actually a pepper product for passion vine hopper and cicadas in kiwi fruit. And so, you know, just the other day, I got a grower telling me that his place was clean of all the cicadas, and all of his neighbors were just swamped with them and things like that, you know. So, yeah, we get feedback, but, you know, I'm one person who has an incredibly, you know, I spend 60% of my time on research. Luckily, you know, I'm able to do that. So, you know, I'm not a marketer. I'm not that interested in being a multi-millionaire for the sake of it, you know. So I tend to focus on pay the bills and then go and do the research, you know. So I haven't really pushed into the wine industry there at all, really. You know, and I'm in two minds about this whole wine industry and biodynamics, and that, you know, alcohol pushes out the spirit, and every modern illness is a poorly incarnated spirit. So, you know, the solution to most illnesses, we got to pull the spirit in. Meanwhile, we're out there encouraging alcoholism, you know, which is pushing the spirit out. And, you know, so I'm in two minds about helping the wine industry, tell you the truth.
Maybe I'll go out and make all those millions that if you don't want to. And I
Feel
also
free.
Thank you very much.
Please do.
You're a lovely man. I also think, you know, Steiner got the Waldorf School was from a tobacco factory, you know.
That's correct. That's correct. You know, and
yeah,
that's it. So, you know, we can only make our own personal choices. And, you know, in New Zealand, the only biodynamic activity that's succeeding is the wine industry.
You know, 10,000 hits biodynamics on Google. Wine this, wine. Yeah, the most popular course on BDAC is the wine course at the moment.
And dare I say it's because it's a low fertility crop. And
I think it's
so.
Go on. Yeah, sorry.
You know, my perception of biodynamics is that they're not very good at dealing with high fertility crops. You know, like dairy farms, you can do biodynamically because you've got an excess of nutrition. And wine you can do because they don't like a lot of nutrition. But a whole lot of, you know, fruiting crops like kiwi fruit and all these things, they are high fertility crops. And if you don't feed them one way or another, and this is mineralization as well, then you can't meet the market standards. Okay. And so, you know, there are these sort of couple of places where biodynamics works, but there's a whole lot of places that it doesn't, you know. So
I got the wine story slightly different. I had assumed that it was because there's a whole culture of people who are talking about quality and fine nuance in flavor, etc., etc. They've got a language, they've got a tradition, it's valued. There's probably a fair amount of BS in all of that, but at least there's a culture of it.
Oh, most definitely, and you can taste it. I've no doubt that the role of 501 in the wine industry is enormous.
Yeah.
And as you say, they've got the culture of identifying those differences, and that's true. But it does also come down to the fact that they can grow these plants without taking a great deal of notice of nutrition. They can, well, some people can close the gate and have this agricultural individuality and get away with some compost and 500 and 501. But you try that with kiwi fruit, and like, if you don't put on 300 kilograms of potassium sulfate a year, you're not going to get a crop of kiwi fruit that's going to be marketable. So there's not many BD vineyards that are going to be throwing that sort of mineralized activity around. So they get away with it. That's what I'm saying. They're able to sort of get away with this low fertility, but try it with kiwi fruit, see how you go.
Okay, so what would happen to kiwi fruit if you didn't feed it heavily?
The fruit stays very small,
right?
And you need a big fruit like that to meet the market and get the right payment. You're heavily what you'd say disadvantaged if you're just coming up with these small kiwi fruit that you'll find in organic kiwi fruit shops. That's not the market. They need these decent sized kiwi fruit, and a lot of them.
What's
10,000 trays.
What's the quality of those smaller organic kiwis like?
Well, they're probably nice and they're probably sweet and all that sort of thing, but the market's not going to buy them. You'll sell them to your organic marketplace, but you're not going to sell it into the main industry. So that's just one example. Is what I'm saying is it is about sustainability is about making a profit so you're there next year.
Yeah.
It's not about subsidized agriculture with lots of free inputs that is actually allowing you to produce something that just pays the bills. That's not the agricultural world I live in.
Mm-hmm.
We've got one person running a 5,000 acre sheep farm. It's we don't have that free labor in our economy. So.
No, I hear you. And sometimes that's because the market is a bit mad, and sometimes it's because it's a reality. And I guess I'm a little bit resistant to thinking that you've got to super fertilize with external inputs in order to get a good healthy farm organism, let's say. So I'm just thinking that one through as we speak.
Yeah, it doesn't fit the biodynamic paradigm, but that's the reality that I live in. Like, we don't have subsidies here. There is no farm subsidies for organic agriculture. You get a bit of a premium in the price, but that's it. There's and so we live in a particular reality, and it's like, are you going to cope with that or not? And in New Zealand, the biodynamics is really a third world practice. It works really well in India, but you try and transplant that here, and it's it's so unrealistic that we might have 5 vineyards doing biodynamics. And I think we've got one sheep farm that grows wheat, and that's about it. Because the actual practice is 19th century third world, and I think, like, we saw that trial that was shown from Seacombe about the sweet corn and the difference between the conventional preps and the homeopathic preps, and the homeopathic preps stood up and showed that they were doing the job and producing healthy plants and so on. So, I think this is a reality that biodynamics is going to have to grasp in the next 100 years, is that everyone's struggling with cow horns and getting the organs, and the whole practicality of the method is becoming very difficult, and the homeopathy solves all of these problems, and there's no shortage of supply. I bought 5 sets of preparations in 1991, and I'm still using that. I haven't bought any more. And we put it in a bottle and we ship it, and people put it in their spray tanks and they spray it. So the functionality is there, the proof is there, and it's the biodynamic sort of mindset that is really holding themselves back, really. And well, I don't really know how to solve all those questions, other than just to get on and do it myself. It's the it's the space between the ears that's the problem.
Yeah. Well, so I had a few questions. Let me go. So this was my little crib sheet.
Yeah, good.
How well does he think BD community has done in the last 100 years? We kind of touched on that. And then we've got, what might this community do given this for the future? And I think you've just gone on to that one quite nicely. Yeah. So, what the kind of issues we're facing now, probably the same for you guys, is our average age for a farmer over here is the kind of guys like us, wrinkles, bags under the eyes, and everything heading south. Just if you've got any bright ideas about how to get the next generation of farmers coming through.
Well, the thing that's running through my brain at the moment is nothing succeeds like success. Mm-hmm. It's when people can see success and see a pathway. That's what brings people into it, and there's a whole problem, of course, with just land. Like it's a privilege to be a farmer now, and in New Zealand, you inherit your farm, you don't buy it. The number of people who make money somehow and then buy a farm is, I don't know, 0.001% of the farmers. So it's a very privileged occupation.
You've got a slightly different vibe here, in that there's a lot of people they recognize the ecological shitstorm that's happening and coming in buckets, and they've given their land away to the land trust, so the biodynamic land trust and the ecological land trust, because they want to leave this in perpetuity to be the good guys.
Right.
Yeah, it's brilliant. The struggle immediately is to get farmers who are trained up to be the good guys, to be the person to do what is necessary on that land. So yeah,
nothing succeeds like success. It's really only by having the success will people really come on board. And as I say, what successes do we need? Well, we need to solve powdery mildew and downy mildew and brown rot and black spot and all your pest problems and your soil fertility problems. That's what we need to solve. And what can you say?
I know you've said it, Glenn. I mean, you could say it in a different way, but I think you've said it, and you demonstrated.
What I'm wanting to say is, okay, we've had these solutions actually sitting there for 20 years. Who's taking any notice? Who's doing the support? Who's questioning? Like, where's the, where is that? And this, I'm talking about the biodynamic movement. Where is the biodynamic movement supporting the successes? Whereas, I've done all this by myself. Yep. And, whilst I'm slaying the dragons, and those dragons are more often than not as pacifist, so it's like, where's the support? Where's the sort of nurture? what, in 2000, I got those 3 bits of research from the New Zealand Hort Research proving homeopathic remedies, and the bird control.
Yeah, yeah.
Photosynthesis, increased photosynthesis, 20%.
Yeah.
What would that do to the European agricultural system? It's like nothing.
Yeah.
Literally no feedback, no sort of, well, not even a good on you, mate. But
Yeah.
how can we use this? How can we incorporate this? How can we support this? There has to be some very nefarious bloody dudes sitting there blocking all this stuff,
Uh-huh.
is really the only logical answer. And so, I guess what we've all done is just get on with it, regardless of this dead center. And what else can we do? Because of course it's our personal journeys that we're on, and I'm doing this because this is my journey, regardless of any support. It's just very disappointing, I guess, is all you can say.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you've done your course at the Goetheanum. You're gradually being ignored less. Let's put it that way. And sort of, and from what you said, people thought it was brilliant, and some people were on fire about it. So is it just banging one's head against the wall until eventually you get through and hope there's someone who's got a cranium left to do the banging from then on?
Well, in that research day, the first 2 presentations were on homeopathic preparations.
Yeah.
And if we think back, I don't know, when the last time I was there, which might have been 10 years ago, I guess, we did have 1 session on homeopathic preparations, and so it's coming, it's, and Seacom have basically said they're going to be using homeopathic preparations a lot.
Mhm.
They'll fulfill their Demeter requirements of conventional preparations, and then they'll be using homeopathics, so
So maybe we
I can,
shouldn't be quite so disappointed. It might be just the
well,
turning circle of this big heavy bastard thing.
well, I can see, we're slowly moving the mountain.
Yeah.
Is all I can say, is that I can look back in there and I can see, the footprints of all the sort of pulling of the, bashing and slowly, and I think there's also biodynamics is reaching a dead end, and they're going to have to do something. They're going to have to make a jump. And one of the things the baseball bats I've been wielding is that biodynamics has to get together with the medical stream.
Yeah.
And we have to use the medical stream's frame of reference and context, which is 4 bodies in 3 systems, if we're going to understand the agriculture course. Yeah. And I would say that we're at this point where we have to stop saying we don't understand the agriculture course, because I do. If you want to understand it, ask me, I'll tell you. And it is this medical understanding, that's what's there. And so
let's give you a minute here, because we've talked about the 4 bodies, the spirit, the astral, the etheric, and the physical. You haven't talked about the 3 systems. I know you've done it loads elsewhere, but let's use it. Here's your soapbox.
So the 3 systems is really just the nerve sense system, the rhythmic system, and the metabolic system. And so we've got these 4 activities all working in each of these systems. And if one or other of these are out of balance in that system, then you'll get a problem. Like in the breathing system, asthma, for example, is where we've got too much of this nerve sense astrality working into the lungs, and we can't breathe, it's locked up. And so it's about how do we reinstitute the etheric activity into that process to sort of release that astrality so that we can breathe, things like this. So, and migraines is a really lovely story in that it's this disturbed metabolism that is, in a sense, too much. Okay, you've eaten something you can't digest. Like my wife, pork is a real classic. Every time she eats pork, she gets a migraine. So what's happening is this disturbed australity in the metabolic system is pushing right up into the head, and you get this sort of boof. And so it's inflammation from the metabolism into the head. And so the solution to this, that Rudolf Steiner put forward, was silica, basically, but Beador, which was a mixture of silica and sulfur and iron. And so it's basically getting this nerve sense process and sort of pushing it back down into the belly again, So it's this whole interplay of these 4 activities taking place in these 3 systems. And it's really about balancing that out so that we maintain this harmonious middle that will then sort of keep us alive. Mm-hmm. And, that's it. There's anthroposophical medicine right in that sort of picture, really.
Well done.
And yeah.
So that's the game. Rudolf
Yep.
Steiner has given us these amazing gifts, as you call them, of the preparations. That between you and Bernard Leverhulst and Rudolf Steiner, we've got a really good idea of what they do in the equalizing of them. We've got the image of the nematodes. We've got your curly peach curl.
Yep.
Let's go. Okay, so just what's in my head. So the way I thought of carrots before is things that would normally happen in the flower. You don't get much flower on a carrot. The inflorescence isn't gaudy and lively. The color and the flavor is down in the root. So this is a flower pattern which has, in a healthy way, gone down into the root, not as with your peach curl. What's the difference between when it's pathological, as in the peach curl, and when it's a healthy thing that's happening in the carrots?
Okay, so what you're saying there is that the colouring of the carrot, in particular, is a flowering process that has been displaced into the root.
Yeah.
Now, okay, is that the picture that you're getting?
That's what I'm working. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's look at the carrot worm. A displaced flowering in the root is going to be your carrot rootworm.
Yeah.
Okay, same impulse. It's just displaced, isn't it? It's an australity process that's coming too deeply into the soil.
Okay, so the root fly or the rootworm is problematic, but the nice flavoursome and that beautiful carrot smell and those amazing range of colours of carrots are the good thing. How can we get the bad thing but keep the good thing?
Well, again, it comes to this net. We've got something escaping. It's like in that leaf curl where the flowering is escaping the boundary. We've got the boundary of the flower, but it's breaking out and running into the leaf. Well, you could almost say that about the carrot. That flowering process isn't being contained in the carrot. It's sort of slipping out into this other region, and that's what feeds the carrot fly. So it's about incorporating that australity back into the plant. And okay, obviously there's some etheric activity that needs to be stimulated in the soil itself. And this may come back to the fact that there's not enough humus in the soil, that it's actually quite a mineralized soil. And so it's not got that life process around it coming in the soil to maintain it. There's not enough fungi in the soil. Even,
but the interesting thing with carrots is they really they don't like any sort of reasonably fresh manure. They want a 2-year composting process, practically mineralized, ideally in a really fairly high silica soil.
Yeah.
So to bring the etheric into there, it has to be well contained for the carrots.
Well, this is Yeah, I agree. So it's all about balance, you know, and you know, it's still well, in Australia, for example, they think 1% organic matter in the soil is actually pretty good. Whereas here we've got 8% organic matter in our soil, you know, just normal. So, you know, it's that sort of scale. Let's say, you know, for a healthy carrot, we need 3% organic matter in the soil, and we've only got 1, you know. So it's allowing that australity process to be working in a more active manner, you know. So it also then comes down to how those life forces in the soil are working, you know. So you know, what's disturbing that, you know, how you've also got this picture with Rudolf Steiner about the activity of the previous season works through the earth and comes out the next season. Now, you might have had a hot, dry, harsh autumn, and that activity is still lingering in the soil the next spring, and that's what's causing this disturbed australity activity, you know. So there's, you know, there's all those different parameters that you've sort of got to look at, you know, in the context of the environment you've got. But the principle is, I guess, what we're talking about is, you know, why is the australity giving us a nice carrot, but at the same time we've got this worm running, you know? So it's the same energy, it's just displaced. And we might get away with, you know, people are using the 500p preparation, and so you're getting the harmonizing activity of all the preparations, but you're still getting that sort of etheric stimulus of the manure, and that the solution might just be spraying that once, and that would sort of just close that net up and let the carrot get on, you know.
Interesting. You know, I've often thought, you know, in trying to think, where do we go next? How do we get more farmers? How do we bring this picture of the 4 bodies and the three areas of the plant and the human? How about going to 1,000 years in the future and thinking, what would biodynamics look like if it were perfected or pretty damn good? You know, a mature technology. We would, you know, would planting calendars still be there, or would we be thinking of that previous year and saying, oh, well, it's looking like with the planets doing this, it's going to be a really bad year for X, Y, Z. You know, somehow I feel we'd be on top of those issues, and at the moment I would be drowning in them.
Yeah, 1,000 years in the future, I think, you know, we're just going to be dealing with energy at that point, and we're probably going to just be sitting here meditating light over our gardens, and everything will grow lovely, you know. You know, and I sort of get that about my chemistry, and especially, you know, we're collecting those energies out of a circle now in water, you know, and going and spraying them around, you know. So I do get it that this is in the future for a lot of people, you know, for their consciousness to get that. But the reality is it's here now, you know. And my friend Peter Backus, he does this. We're looking at the planets for the next season and what's that doing and this sort of thing. And you know, I guess that Rudolf Steiner's seasonal picture of how everything's working through the season that I've clarified in this essay called Energetic Plant Growth. You know, I personally now see that as this sort of basic model that we in biodynamics need to be observing, and just, you know, the first step is to watch this through the season. And you know, there's this okay, there's the fructification event in the winter, but then, you know, I can't pick your months up, but I guess it's for us it's in August, and you know, you can see this earth etheric activity come forward, and then at the spring equinox the light processes increase, and then, you know, just halfway between midsummer and spring you get this warmth process coming in. And by the way, that's when you get your first attack of powdery mildew, when this warmth process comes in. So the question is, how much is that warmth process not being integrated, you know? And in the same way, so we've got this seasonal cycle picture that's available to us, you know, but it's not very clearly talked about or understood, which I hope I've done that, you know. And but with that comes this sort of image of the plant that we need to develop. You know, it's very easy for people to say, oh, the plants are only a physical and etheric activity, you know, so, but it's not. The plant has 4 bodies. It has an astral activity around it, and it has a spirit activity below it in the earth. And, you know, Rudolf Steiner gives us this picture of these 4 activities of the cosmic forces and the earthly substance working from below upwards, and the earthly forces and cosmic substance working from above. So when we're looking at the process of warmth, we're looking at this warmth process that's coming from below and the warmth process coming from above. And in that period between spring and summer, that's when this warmth is coming in. And so if these 2 warmths aren't joining together, then we get powdery mildew. You know, we've got to look at powdery mildew. It's dry and hot. So how is this not working? How is this sort of warmth body sort of slopping out of its boundary? And so, you know, the solution of powdery mildew at that time of year is, how do we combine this atmospheric warmth with the earth warmth? And in a way, this is what 501 is. You know, we've got this earth substance of the nerve sense system that Steiner has put into the summer cycle, put into the metabolic realm. And so in many ways, this is actually helping these 2 warmths work together. And you can look at, you know, you can look at it with these with a similar light.
Sorry, Glenn, back to you. I'm just saying.
So, you know, it's how do we use these basic images that Rudolf Steiner has given us to solve these problems? And you know, but we've got to get the story right, and we actually haven't had the story right. We've been working, you know, my comments about Wachschmuth and how he's sort of really emphasized the ethers. And what I see is that got set up into the educational organizations, and they're still teaching this, you know, that the ethers are the primary formative forces that we're working with. But of course, there's no connection of the ethers to the preparations, you know. So, you know, which preparation works with which ether, you know, and Rudolf Steiner didn't say anything about this. So you know, there's this dead end in that, you know, and I think the educational institutions have to be re-educated. You know, they have to get with the bodies and the systems. You know, the ethers are great for observation, but, you know, is it the ethers? What is an ether? An ether is where the spirit, like the warmth ether, is when the spirit, the star forces, come down and work into the atmosphere, work into that etheric sphere. And the planets working into that etheric sphere gives us the light ether. So the light ether is not the formative principle. The planets are the formative principle. It's just that they're working in the etheric. And so, you know, we have to sort of expand our concept to these bigger context rather than just the ethers. And you know, like that.
Ernst Marty's only just been translated into English in the last few years, and up till then, kind of Wachschmuth had the floor to himself, I think.
Most definitely, but you know, Leavegood laid it out in 1951. Read the introduction to that book, and he lays it out clear as a bell. You know, that it is this interplay of these 4 bodies. And yes, Marty made that comment. Popelbaum made the comment with Bockemühl in 1981. You know, so there's been people trying to influence this, but as I say, when I look back at it, you know, Wachschmuth was there from 1924 until 1963. You know, so he was this very dominating influence, and I think that's how it got set up into the educational institutes, these few that are around have got this pattern, and they just keep rolling out this same story. And it's a nice story and it has application, but it only goes so far. And as I say, it doesn't really address all the other bodies. Like Wachsmuth doesn't talk about the astral or the spirit. They're not in his conversation at all. And we've got to bring them back, and in the spirit, as I say, is this force that pushes up. It's the force that sort of wants the seed to become mature. And if that force is weak, then of course we've got this whole 6th lecture story of fungus, that we've got this strong watery process coming out of the earth and allowing for fungus to occur up here. And part of that story is that this male force is weak. And that's why we need clay in the resolving of fungus, because we've got to push that force right through. And in a sense, that's where the calcium is carried up into the rest of the plant. And so we've got this free earthly substance process that's just sort of running around like this. And so we've got to suck that back. We can push it back, but we've got to push up the cosmic silica, the cosmic forces. And this is a very real lever that we have that really isn't talked about, the role of the spirit in the growth of plants. And so what we're getting all the time is that the spirit in agriculture, in biodynamic agriculture, is the farmer, and that he's the one that's bringing in the. And so at the last conference, we have these Buddhist monks telling us about how we're going to transform the human. It's more, and so we're getting off into social policy. This is what half the conference was, is this sort of social policy. So it's lost its way, and it needs to bring this back. And I've written this article called "The Spirit in Biodynamics," and I've tried to indicate, look, at every level of the game, we've got the spirit active. In chemistry, we've got all these elements that are working with the spirit. That's all. So, yeah, what can I say?
Thanks for trying.
Sorry.
Thank you for trying.
Yeah, well, it's. I think biodynamics is, well, in New Zealand in particular, it's really coming to quite a crossroads. It's going to have to make some pretty big changes, or it's just going to become an irrelevant gardeners club. And we don't get invited to any of the organic conferences or anything anymore. It's sort of permaculture, and even agrohomeopathy is becoming the thing. I'm writing this book at the moment, biodynamic homeopathy, because agrohomeopathy and biodynamic homeopathy are two very, very different things. And we're looking at primary cause, and they're looking at symptoms. We got this problem, we find this solution, okay, that's it, let's go. They're not sort of, in a sense, addressing the energetic cause of the problem.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, Hahnemann was very quiet about his sources. And he was quite a long time before Steiner, and there was 1899 in the middle. So, if I consider and it's materia medica, the positive side is it's looking for success stories, and it's laying them out in a systemic way. But Steiner's criticism of the homeopaths from the medical lectures, from what I get, is that they never have a system. It's purely empirical. I tried this, it did that. The law of symbols is a little bit helpful, but it's not really clarifying the game. And Steiner had a lot of time for the homeopaths, but was well aware that there wasn't a systemic picture. There wasn't the picture, the narrative into which it falls. And still homeopathy doesn't know who it is and what it's doing. but it works very well with precedent, and it's very good at sharing its stories. And there's still a lot of hope and activity around. But and I just gave a talk to the Society of Homeopaths about what biodynamics can learn from homeopathy and vice versa. And I like to think it's not dissimilar from what you're saying. I don't know what you're writing, but to have the story, it's like having the either loads of jigsaw pieces or having the lid. Stein has given us the lid. This is the picture, guys. That little blue thing fits there. And homeopaths saying, I've got a blue thing. And they go, no, I've got a blue thing.
Yeah.
Let's try it.
That's right. It's quite a different system. And, our system, as we've been talking about, is we're looking at a cause. And our solutions are actually very general. My biggest problem in the garden is having enough pests so that I can do experiments, and I'm only using very simple remedies, and they're covering a wide base. As I said earlier on, I think that's the real big difference, is that once you get the cause, you sort of eliminate an awful lot of symptoms in one go.
Yeah.
And as I say, when I sit down and think about it, I think half a dozen remedies would pretty much cover most of the problems that all of agriculture has.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I'm sure loads of people would like to have that problem.
It's, as we know, you feed things, 80% of your problems can be solved if you feed your plants. Just get your soil healthy, make sure they've got plenty of available, stable nutrient, and you're going to knock out most of your problems. And then it's really just the weather that's going to be causing the trouble. The shifts in cold and moisture and heat and these sorts of things are going to knock your plants. Like we've had these really beautiful springs here, lots of bit of warmth and lots of moisture, and then all of a sudden it just dries up. Bang, so the plants are all growing in one environment, and then the environment changes. So that's your problem. It's not nutrition, it's actually the environment. So that's really what we're working with, is how do we make the allowances for these environmental changes that occur, rather than a nutrition problem.
Interesting. So who is listening to you? I like to think I'm a bit of an ear, but who else is around?
Oh, most definitely you are. Well,
anything in the States? I mean, you've lost Hugh Lovell.
Yes, I know, that's a bit of a shame. It's hard to know, but at the conference there just recently, various people kept popping out of the crowd going, I really love this story or that story, or I read this here, and so it's like obviously people are finding bits that they're loving and doing and so on. But otherwise, I don't know. It's I've been encouraged. Eduardo, the new co-leader, he came up and introduced himself and said hello, and as you know, he helped me get that 10-minute talking slot at the research day, and his wife was in my workshop, and she's contacted me since and said that they'd like to talk further and this sort of thing, So, Marisol in Spain is very open and working and thinking about things that I'm talking about. And, you can sort of see it around, but as I say, I don't feel over encouraged or supported by the biodynamic movement as such. It's very much, to do this work for 50 years, you got to do it for yourself. I've done it so I can do it. I love taking those. The biodynamic preparations have been my primary healthcare for the last 30 years. And, I like having a healthy garden and not having to spray anything. I haven't sprayed copper or sulfur for, 25 years, so I like it for myself is why I do it.
Yeah.
I like understanding the agriculture course. I like Steiner's seasonal picture. So
You don't fool me, Glenn. It's not just for yourself. You've got a strong element of service in you.
most definitely. But
Yeah.
yes, I've given it all away. It's all on my website. It's totally. My children aren't interested, so I'm not keeping it for the family. So what are you going to do with it? And the best you can do. And if you try and sell it, you're self-censoring. Because people have got to see the value to give you the money to get the information. So don't self-censor, so therefore you just give it away and people can do what they want to do with it. So yes, there's all that, but the basic motivation as to why I've done it in the first place is quite selfish. And when I look at it, you don't do this stuff for 50 years and not get paid for it. And you don't keep doing it unless you've got some personal motivation. You want it for yourself.
Mm.
And if it helps others, great, more than happy. But ultimately, as I say, I like having a healthy garden. I like not spraying copper. That's the real deal.
I'm going to take it with a pinch of salt, but I heard you.
Well, thank you for recognizing the service that's behind it. And yes, there is service, but service alone is not going to do it.
No.
That's not a good enough motivator.
Yeah. Maybe for some bodhisattva it is, but maybe not for us.
Well, 50 years with no support, you're going to have a little bit of personal desire, in the game. But anyway, it's irrelevant, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know. I was wondering about getting into APOP agriculture and all the Christian stuff, but maybe that's just going to not be particularly enlightening.
That's right. All I can really say about that is I see the way forward, that I would like to break the biodynamic movement into 3 streams. And, anthroposophical agriculture is valid, and obviously it's not going to go away.
How are you defining anthroposophical agriculture?
Well, I guess the best way is to define what energetic biodynamics is. Okay. And, that's what I see I'm talking about. Keep it real. We're going to look at the stars and the planets and the atmosphere and the earth. Whereas anthroposophical agriculture will start talking about all the hierarchy of beings that are there and all the spirit beings and the big Christ story and Lucifer and Ahriman and all this evolution, and we're Christianizing the elementals, and they've got this big picture going on, and it's okay, that's fine, they can have that story, but we actually don't need it. We can talk about the stars and the planets and the atmosphere and the earth as the primary sources of these 4 bodies. And we can work within that nerve sense metabolic. It's actually it's not materialism, but it's a rational, realistic, energetic approach to Rudolf Steiner's work, and we can use that as a functional methodology and modality to solve problems, whilst keeping it in an energetic reality, But then there's this stream of biodynamics, which we sort of see in the research group that we were in that day, where these guys are working with the bugs, and they want to see the bugs in the preparations and look, the bugs are actually infecting the soil. We've proven that, and we had that sort of picture of the Seacom with the sweet corn picture, and they're going, well, the bugs are less in the homeopathic realm. And it's like, well, why is that? You know, how come? And they're sort of asking this question. Maybe there's something more, you know, at which point I sort of jump into them and sort of go, well, you know, and I look back at that now, you know,
I remember.
the whole wild colonial boy image, you know, this wild bastard from the periphery jumping in and yelling at them, you know. But the point is, you know, they're quite materialistic, and they want that, and it's important, you know, Pfeiffer and Kirk and all them, you know, it's a really important stream to get all of this energetic biodynamics earthed, and what is the practical structures of these things, you know. And so I see those three streams, that we have this very materialistic biodynamics, which is fine, and that's where people can enter, you know, and look at all the science and all that. And then we have this energetic biodynamics, where we're just dealing with the physical reality of the energetic bodies of the earth. And then we have anthroposophical agriculture that can take us off into Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy. And so we've got to honor all streams, you know, we need those three streams. And so, you know, that's what I would do, is clarify that. And you know, the anthroposophical agriculture, it's like, let's give them their space, but let's not scare the natives, you know, let's not sort of make that the primary sort of story that we're giving to, you know, modern humanity.
Very interesting.
You know, so
well, I'm glad I asked you, really, now, because yeah, I mean, that is a useful threefold in there, and it doesn't make anyone the baddie unless it's in the wrong place. So that's all good stuff. Yeah.
You know, and that's, you know, yeah, you know, the incorporation of the medical worldview is the obvious step, you know, like, that's all I'm trying to bring. I'm not bringing Glen Atkinson biodynamics. I'm bringing anthroposophical medicine into biodynamics. You know, that's all I want to do, is sort of lead them to the door and poof, here, have it. It's not, you know, biodynamics is at a crossroads. If they keep going down this anthroposophical agriculture, social policy road, they're lost, you know.
And I see that social policy stuff, which frustrates the crap out of me and made me fall asleep in almost every lecture. I see that as part of the material thing. I don't see it as part of the APOP stuff.
Well, they've lost their way. They've got, you know, they've got 500, 501 and cowpad pit.
Yeah. That's
it. That's their preparations that everyone's using, you know, at that research day. And you know, the French have made 500p. So it's come down to 500p and silica.
Yeah.
That's it. And we just spray that, and then, oh, what are we going to do? We don't understand the agriculture course, so we can't really talk about that. The ethers is a nice story, but we can't really do anything with that. We can observe the ethers, but we can't actually do anything with them. So we can't actually solve our pest and disease problems. So we just use sulfur and copper, and, you know, so we become organics plus 500p and silica. And so what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
We've got this big section, we've got all these associations, we've got all this stuff. Oh, what are we going to, oh, well, let's talk about other cultures. Yeah. And so we've got Maoris, and we've got the Indians, and we've got these people who are sort of talking about the same stuff, but really they're not giving us anything dynamic. So what are we going to do now? Oh, well, we better start talking about the social relationships on the you know, in the communities that we're trying to build with all this free labor. Yeah. You know, so we better start talking about that. You know, so they're filling up a gap. They're filling up a hole that they've got, and it's not biodynamics. You know, like, look at all those main lectures at the conference recently. Where was the biodynamics in any of it? You know, you've got a bit in the workshops, but otherwise, you know.
Yeah, well, no one, you see why you and maybe one or two others are Can you have three of you being unique? Are rare beasties. There's hardly anyone's looking under the bonnet. They're,
Yep.
just, they're just thinking, oh, we'll drive this. I don't know which is reverse, which is forward, which is, the indicators. It's a thing. Steiner gave it. It must be perfect, and conversation closed. And this is why I think it's really important, even if it's only one or two people ever listen to this highly edited little chat we're having. If people start looking under the bonnet and asking those questions that they're almost taboo, the things, in a way it's simple and it's an elusive obvious, but I think part of the reason is because no one, like you say, no one's understood the agriculture course. No one reads it
Mm.
anymore. It's
Mm.
just suspicious activity that you think you've understood it, Glenn, you egotistical lunatic.
Oh,
Loony.
well, that's right. No one believes me if I say I've understood it,
Yeah.
but at the same time, no one's asking me, call me, mate.
Yeah.
Call my bluff. Come on, call my bluff. And that's what more. But yeah, how are you expecting to be taken seriously if you sit there and say you don't understand your central document? Oh, but we can then go forward and start making up all sorts of stories about it. We don't understand it, but we can go forward and start making up stories about it. How uncredible is that as a stance?
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm coming along saying I do understand it. Call my bluff. Come on.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing I would love to change at the 100-year mark, is that we do understand the document.
Mm.
And the mere fact that I can do what I do shows that I understand the document. It's and what question can't I answer?
Ooh. Yeah. So, well, I mean, for me, this is the crucial thing about this 100-year and the challenge. Looking back and looking forward, this seems like the issue. If it's an ineffable document, okay, there's 90% of the anthropops will sort of line up in that place here. Can't understand it. It's far too much. It's only, people who know God personally who can understand this. And then there's this tiny little dribble of people who are having a go, trying to talk about it, showing their work, saying, this is what I think. I don't get this bit. Do you have this piece of the puzzle? Oh, thank you. Brilliant. Now I can crack on. And I was saying that to Christina Henach. We were getting down to a little bit of a conversation there with Benjamin and co, where they were talking about the clay and what this was doing. And I was sort of hungry. Where do you meet? What pub do we go to have this ongoing conversation? And they said, well, this is it. So it's just as bad in Germany.
Oh, most definitely. It's a chronic thing all the way through. And as I say, if Enzo and I are the only two people prepared to stand up and say we understand this thing, then if you don't actually talk to us and take it seriously, you're not going to hear it.
Yeah.
And so
yeah, okay.
How bad can you stand it is really all we can say at the moment, because it's outrageously obvious that we're walking down a dead-end path and we're just filling it up with glitter. And there's a very small number of people who buy the glitter, really. And,
we clarified that one. That's what we need to do for the next 50 years of our lives.
Well, give me 7. I reckon we could make a pretty big change, in the next 7 years, because it's, as I say, the biodynamic education institutes have to be re-educated. We need to retool them. They've got a really good basis. Their ethos story is okay. We can work from that, but we need to sort of put it into a bigger context. And show practical application. When people leave these courses, they need to be able to make their own remedy that's going to solve their problem, not have some fuzzy belief system that they're working with.
Yeah,
They have real tools. And yeah.
Well, crikey, we've been moaning and chatting and stuff for 2 hours here, Glenn.
Oh, really? Amazing.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
I guess it's about positivity, really, isn't it? Just, try and keep it positive, really.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Well, there's a very good note to finish on. I like that one.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
well done, Glenn, for 50 years, and thank you for this.
Yeah. Lucky we don't have much memory, isn't it? Because all of a sudden it's 50 years, Gee.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm happy to have been the person to do what I've done. It's lucky me.
Good. Yeah. Well, good on you.
Yeah, thanks. And you too. That consider as a great thing, making it all available. It's brilliant.
Mm.
And